Hello everybody. Now today I would like to focus on the importance and the significance of the symbol of the paper lantern in A Streetcar Named Desire. This is a play that's imbued with symbolism, and I'm fully aware that a wider motif in the play is Williams's use of light. In fact, it was actually asked as an exam question a couple of years ago on the Edexcel specification. But today I want to really narrow the focus and think about the paper lantern and how it is used in general. So I'm going to sort of track its introduction and development throughout the play, and then wrap up with some of really my key thoughts on how it is used and its purpose within the play as a whole. Now, before we do that, we do need to pay close attention to Blanche's opening stage directions. We're given this quite lengthy passage at the start of the play about how she is incongruous to the setting, how her attire and her demeanour in general doesn't fit into the quite brutal and stark world of Elysian Fields. But at the end of this stage directions, we get told that her delicate beauty must avoid a strong light. There is something about her uncertain manner, as well as her white clothes, that suggests a moth. So this moth imagery is introduced straight away, and it is reflective on one hand of her delicacy. Williams explicitly mentions her delicate beauty, perhaps suggesting that it could be shattered very quickly. But not only does it stress her delicacy, but her fragility also. Okay, he stresses her uncertain manner. As we know of students of the play, Blanche has what Williams dubbed as a feverish vivacity to her, an almost neurotic excitability. She is skittish. She flits about both in her physical presence and her conversation. So this passage here at the end of this opening stage directions really sort of encapsulates this. Now, I wanted you to bear this in mind as we introduce the idea of the paper lantern, because immediately from the start of the play we are aware of her uncertain manner, we are aware of her sort of her need to avoid this strong light. And the paper lantern itself is introduced in scene 3, the poker night, when she has this sort of semi-flirtatious exchange with Mitch, and she requests that he puts this little adorable coloured paper lantern over the light bulb, and Mitch obviously obliges. He's been very polite here at this stage. And she says at the end of this exchange that she can't stand a naked light bulb more than I can stand a rude remark or a vulgar action. Now, it is very fitting when we think about the development of this symbol within the play that it is Mitch who originally puts up the paper lantern for Blanche. Mitch obviously represents a very dim and somewhat pallid hope of security and stability for Blanche. So it is fitting that he assists her in putting up this sort of illusory symbol, a symbol of her constructed reality. And she makes it quite clear here that she can't stand a naked light bulb. Now, we become aware that this is because she is acutely fearful, she is acutely perceptive of her fading beauty. And in scene 5, although we become aware of this much sooner than scene 5, this is one of the scenes in which we get a glimmer of truth from Blanche. She sort of spills out some of her emotions a little bit more clearly than in other parts of the play to Stella. And she admits here that she was never hard or self-sufficient enough. And she mentions about the idea of being soft, and soft people shimmering and glowing. Notice this repetition here of soft people, soft colours, soft and attractive. And she basically admits here that she wants to shimmer and glow. She wants to appear soft and attractive. Notice here also that she mentions the colours of butterfly wings. She wants to put a paper lantern over the light of the truth. Notice also how the moth that we see in the opening stage directions by Williams has been upgraded to a butterfly. Obviously an animal with much more positive connotations of beauty. It's almost here that already Blanche is sort of dressing up the harsh reality of her situation. But she says it's not just enough to shimmer and glow. You need to be soft and attractive, and I'm fading now. I don't know how much longer I can turn the trick. So here we become acutely aware of Blanche's insecurity around her age and her fading beauty. It is fitting, really, that the paper lantern, in effect, allows her or gives her this environment in which she can shimmer and glow. She can be protected from the harshness of reality, the harsh light of reality. Now, moving on to scene 9, this is where the significance of the paper lantern really ramps up. Scene 9 is what I could only describe as an uncomfortable expose of Blanche's lies and deceit. By this time, Stanley has started to unravel some facts about her promiscuous past and has, quote-unquote, wised up his friend Mitch about this off stage. Now, following her very tragic birthday, a steaming drunk Mitch rocks up to have a sort of one-to-one with Blanche and to question her on some of this. And he questions the fact that she never really wants to go out until after 6. He says, you never want to go out till after 6, and then it's always some place that's not lighted much. She tries to bat this off in her usual sort of evasive fashion that is typical of Blanche. But basically what he says here is that he's never had a real good look at her. Blanche, let's turn the light on here. Now notice the stage directions fearfully. Light, which light, what for? This one with the paper thing on it. Now, not too long ago, we mentioned how Mitch assisted Blanche in putting up the paper lantern and did so, gladly. He wanted to please her. And now the paper lantern, the little adorable coloured Chinese paper lantern, becomes a paper thing, this sort of reductive view of language that we see within Mitch as well. And notice the stage directions here. He tears the paper lantern off the light. She utters a frightened gasp. What did you do that for? So I can take a look at you good and plain. This is both a metaphorical and physical sort of stripping of Blanche's defence mechanisms here. And she says that removing the paper lantern is insulting. And he said, no, just realistic. Really, in this scene, Blanche is being confronted with the harsh and brutal nature of reality in Elysian Fields. And this is where we get the very, very famous quote from Blanche, I don't want realism, I want magic, which is greeted by a laugh by Mitch. Yes, magic. I try to give that to people. I misrepresent things to them. I don't tell the truth. I tell what ought to be truth. And if that's sinful, then let me be damned for it. Don't turn the light on. Mitch crosses to the switch. He turns the light on and stares at her. She cries out and covers her face. He turns the light off again. Now notice, obviously, later in this scene, we get the somewhat fumbled attempt by Mitch at a sexual assault. But at this stage in the scene, notice how Tennessee Williams imbues this with so much melodrama. Mitch is essentially turning on a light, yet it is met with a frightened gasp. It is met with an imperative, don't turn the light on. She is genuinely worried and fearful of this event. And this is depicted really quite well in the film, which there's a screenshot there just in the upper corner, of her absolute fear. This is quite a violent scene in which a light is turned on. So he imbues this with so much melodrama. And really in this scene, like I said, Blanche is stripped of her defense mechanism. Her lies are exposed. Her prospect of being with Mitch is completely shattered. And her pretenses have just been destroyed completely. So this is a really, really pivotal moment for Blanche. Her constructed reality has fallen and she is left with no audience other than herself. This scene also sets up and foreshadows the events of a later scene. She is now left completely defenseless, completely exposed, and then this leaves really ripe ground for Stanley to walk on in the following scene. We see the paper lantern for the final time in scene 11, just as she's about to be whisked off to the asylum by the matron and the nurse. And Stanley's motivation is really quite clear. He not only wants to get his wife back, his friend back, he also wants his home back. Stanley is instinctually very, very territorial, and he sees Blanche as an intruder in his territory, a part of his sort of animalistic nature. And he says, "You've left nothing here but spilt talcum and old empty perfume bottles. Unless it's the paper lantern you want, take it with you. You want the lantern? Now notice this. He crosses to the dressing table and seizes the paper lantern, tearing it off the light bulb and extends it towards her. She cries out as if the lantern was herself." Now, a lot to unpack here. Not only do we have the quite violent verbs that are commonly associated with Stanley, tearing, seizing, but the fact that this happens in scene 11, after the sort of tragic failure of her potential relationship with Mitch, after her lies have been exposed, the paper lantern actually goes back up in the intermediate scenes. It shows that Blanche is still wanting to maintain pretenses. She's still wanting to maintain this constructed reality, this comforting fiction. And it is brutally torn away, even more so than Mitch, by Stanley. It says here that she cries out as if the lantern was herself. Now, this really heightens not only the physical impact of this, but the metaphorical impact of it. The paper lantern almost becomes an anatomical extension, a physical extension of Blanche. And again, so much melodrama imbued into such an event of tearing down a paper lantern. And this again points to the, like I said, the neurotic excitability of Blanche. So what's really important in scene 11 is that, like I said, the lantern almost becomes a physical, anatomical extension of Blanche herself. It also points more subtly to the differences between Stanley and Mitch. Mitch, in scene 9, attempts to, he does successfully take away the paper lantern, but we know that Blanche puts it back up again. We're not told that explicitly, but it must have, because it's up again in scene 11. So he tears down the paper lantern, but that goes up, and he makes a fumbled, pathetic excuse at a sexual assault of her. Stanley is able to successfully assault her, and he is able to pull down the paper lantern for once and for all. So there is also a subtle peek into the differing depictions of masculinity within this. So, Mitch is essentially a quite ineffectual figure. So just to summarise then some of the key aspects of the paper lantern as a symbol, the paper lantern represents Blanche's constructed reality and what she believes ought to be the truth. It represents a dressing up of reality, and it provides her with this environment, like I said, to be soft and to shimmer and glow, and this is brutally exposed as the play progresses. It is part of an array of symbols that typify Blanche's desire for temporary magic and to hide the harsh truth of reality. Like I said earlier, it is fitting that Mitch, a character who offers Blanche a dim hope of future stability and security, is the person who assists her putting up the lantern in scene 3. However, as her web of mendacity and lies are unravelled, it is brutally torn down by Mitch in scene 9, and even more brutally torn down by Stanley in scene 11. These two acts essentially confirm her ultimate downfall and her position as a non-conformist individual in the world of Elysian Fields. Now, Stanley's final action in scene 11 might be seen as basically a symbolic reenactment of her rape in scene 10. And as I mentioned earlier, I know that this is part of a wider range of symbols attached to the motif of light, and her fear of bright light is in stark opposition to Stanley's delight in, as he says, getting the coloured lights going with Stella, his euphemism for sex. So there is a much wider attachment to the more broad motif of light within the play as well. And Going back to those original stage directions, the light of the paper lantern also brings to mind this moth imagery, attracted to light, and that's an image used to present Blanche's mental fragility. So a lot to unpack there with what on the surface seems like a very simple symbol. Always do remember to try and include an aspect of symbolism within your essays. It's so important within this play. The paper lantern is a really significant one, as it can branch out into many different themes, obviously about Blanche herself, but also the theme of lies and an illusion, and also the broader motif of light that plays a role within the play. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for listening.